Well, good morning. Happy New Year to you and to our guests. We, as Scott mentioned, are so thankful that you are with us this morning. And no creation station really is an apology to the parents, right? We are so sorry. And we know it can be difficult for you, but I want you to know that your children are not going to mess anything up in this worship service. Let your children be children. They will not interfere. We are thankful. A silent auditorium is not a good sign. So we are grateful that we have our families together. Great. Chapter 12, if you want to turn over your Bibles or get your devices over to Luke chapter 12. I also want you to know that sermon notes for this lesson this morning are on your YouVersion Bible app as well. If you head over to More Than Events, because of your location, Memorial Road should pop up at the top of the list, and you can take notes right there on your Bible app. I know that many of you use that app and take notes that way and highlight in different ways. So I wanted to make sure that was available to you as well this morning. It was a couple of years ago. My second daughter, Lucy, was 6 years old, and we had taken her to Six Flags over Texas, and she was just at the right height where she was going to be able to ride the big roller coasters for the very first time. And so she was actually pretty excited to try out a real roller coaster, in her words. And so we started out easy. If you're familiar with Six Flags over Texas in any way, you'll know the Judge Roy Scream, which is an older roller coaster. It doesn't have any loops or upside downs or anything. It has one hill and a couple of turns. So this is a really good starter for the big roller coasters. And so my 6-year-old Lucy gets on to the Judge Roy Scream with her mother, and the bars come down, and Lucy begins to psych herself up. I'm going to love this. I'm going to love this. I'm going to love this. She just keeps repeating over and over again. And so as the roller coaster begins to come out of the start there, it begins to go, she's still strapped in, holding on. I'm going to love this. I'm going to love this. Keeps going up. I'm going to love this. I'm going to love this. Starts to come down. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. First turn. I want off. I want off. She screamed the rest of the roller coaster. I'm guessing, for many, if not all of us, being at the beginning, the start of a new year, is very much like Lucy's experience on her first big roller coaster. Today is a day of excitement because there is a turning of a page, right? There is a newness that comes with New Year. And there is an excitement for some because, as Josh mentioned very poignantly in our communion thoughts this morning, many of you have great joys for this last year, and you're excited to continue that. But there are many of you in here this morning that are looking forward to turning that page because this past year has been a hard year for you. And so we stand at the beginning of a new year excited, because there is a blank slate in front of us. We don't know what's coming. We don't have any idea. Many of us are preparing for this new year, right? Many of you are setting your resolutions or your goals for 2018. You have been probably cleaning out things, getting ready for the new year. Maybe you have even set some goals or family objectives that you want to do together or get ready for. You're kind of taking this time to reevaluate and plan for and strive and be intentional on what you would like for this upcoming year. There's a lot of excitement for this. And as the years begin, we hold on, we say, I'm going to love this. I'm going to love this. 2018, I'm going to love this. But at some point, right, because life happens, because there are things that you and I cannot control, at some point we're going to have our first big hill and we're going to start yelling, I don't like this. I don't like this. Get me off. Get me off. That seems to be how the years typically go. We're excited at this moment, but we don't know what's coming. And I'm thankful, in a lot of ways, I'm thankful for the preparation that so many people take for a new year. I'm thankful that people think about and are intentional and planning and setting goals and thinking about what could be in 2018. I'm grateful for the thinking ahead and planning and thinking and understanding and wanting something different than what you have had and experienced before. In a lot of ways, when we come to this point of the year, this New Year's Eve that we stand on, and we ring in a new year tonight, we stand at a place where we look ahead and we say to ourselves, and maybe we don't really say this, but in a lot of ways, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're striving for. We want to win 2018, right? We want to win it. We want to control it. We want it to be the best year yet. And that seems to be the prevailing attitude in so many areas of life as we stand on this New Year's Eve. But there's something that we need to pay attention to as we stand at this New Year's Eve, as we stand at this moment, this exciting moment of preparing and looking ahead. There's something we need to think about, is that what we plan for, the goals that we set, the things that we desire in the upcoming year always change. I'm going to love this, I'm going to love this, but there's always a moment where we say, I don't like this, I don't like this. Let me give you a couple of quick examples of what I mean by this. Do you know who holds the world record for the 100-meter dash? Even if you're a casual sports fan, you probably know this. It's Usain Bolt. He set the record in 2009 with 9.58 seconds. Now, that's the current world record for the 100-meter dash. He has won the 100-meter. But do you know whose record he broke? His own, back in 2008. In fact, he actually broke his own record again in 2008. Twice he's done this. Usain Bolt has broken his own record 2 different times, now holds the current record. And have you noticed how the times have changed? What once was the world record was no longer when Usain Bolt got faster. And he did it again. Just to kind of give comparison, at least the earliest I could find for the 100-meter world record was back in 1912. Donald Lippincott, 10.6 seconds in 1912. This record has been broken many times since 1912. Usain Bolt, the current record holder, has broken his own record a couple of different times, just to show that. So what's happened here is that what was once the world record, what was once the finish line, the best you could possibly do back in 1912, has changed. The finish line has moved. And when that finish line had moved, there was another changing of the finish line, and it had moved up, and it keeps moving up. And eventually, Usain Bolt's record from 2009 will be broken again because the finish lines are constantly moving for what is a win in life. Here's another example. The current median home price in the United States of America at the end of 2016, at least from the records I found, is $236,400, the median home price in the United States. Just 17 years ago, that price was $119,000. It jumped $116,000 in 17 years, the median home price in this country. Now, what was once kind of average and median has changed, right? And I'm guessing when they come out with the records for the end of 2017, that price is going to go up again. And to give a little perspective of the median home price in in our world today, back in 1950 in the United States, $7,300. So, what was once the median home price, where we said, you know, this is kind of average, this is the win, this is what you can strive for and work towards and have your own home, $7,354. The finish line has moved. And it's moved again, and it's moved over and over these last 60 plus years until we have what we have today, and it's going to continue to move. Here's the first point that I want to make this morning. The cost of winning is always changing. The cost of winning is constantly and forever moving. That finish line is never staying the same. So, when we come to an exciting day like today, because we are welcoming in a new year, we are preparing for the year that lies ahead, we first must understand whatever it is you say your win is for 2018, whatever it is that you have resolved to do, or your goals that you want to meet in 2018, the finish line will change. It won't be there. You will get to that finish line, and then Usain Bolt will come in and he'll break your record. You'll get to the point where you say you have what it is. You've reached your climax. You have been there. You have done it. You have gotten everything that you have reached and asked for and set goals for, and it'll move. And you won't be satisfied any longer, and you'll move towards the next finish line. You'll keep moving. The cost of winning is constantly, forever, always changing. Now, I think this is actually fairly important for us to understand and wrestle with. Because our view of winning, our view of what is a good resolution or a good goal, our view of what it means for me personally to win 2018 has been shaped, it has been formed by a culture and a society and a world that is vastly against Jesus Christ. So what you and I say is a win, what you and I may say today is the finish line, Jesus looks at that finish line. He doesn't even recognize the finish line. He doesn't even acknowledge what the win is. So our constantly moving finish line, the constantly changing win in our own lives is not even recognized by the kingdom of God. Jesus doesn't look at what you and I say is a win. He doesn't even recognize what you and I strive for and what you and I resolve for, the goals that you and I set before us in a new year like today. So many of the things that you and I want and desire and hope for in life are totally against the teachings of Jesus Christ. And that goes for myself. So much of what you and I desire from this world goes totally against everything Jesus has taught us. As one example, Mark chapter 9, verse 35. I just want to read one verse out of Mark 9 before we get to Luke chapter 12. But in Mark 9, the disciples have begun to argue amongst themselves who's the greatest of the 12. And Jesus overhears the conversation. Jesus confronts the 12 and says, "What are you arguing about?" And in Mark chapter 9, verse 34, Scripture says that the disciples were ashamed of how they were arguing. And so they got quiet. They were arguing amongst themselves who of the 12 is the greatest. Who's going to sit at the right hand of Jesus Christ, the Messiah that they had just declared a chapter earlier. And Jesus' response to how they were arguing amongst themselves is this, Mark chapter 9, verse 35. Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. Now, Jesus' response to their argument is this: you got it completely wrong. What you think is a win, sitting at the right hand of me in heaven someday, being the greatest of the 12 disciples, what you think is a win is completely and utterly wrong. You think you have to be the greatest. You think you have to be the right-hand man. You think you have to have the best. You think you need to be on this pedestal. You think you need power and influence. You think you need money. You think you need to have this job. You think you need all these different things. You have it completely wrong. What Jesus begins to do in this particular moment in the gospel story is he begins to just overtly turn upside down the prevailing thought of what a win is in our lives. It's not about being the greatest, it's about being the servant. It's not about being first, it's about being last. He doesn't recognize the finish line that you and I recognize. He doesn't recognize the win that you and I identify. It is a complete upside down, turning it all over into something completely different. I want to go to Luke chapter 12. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus tells a parable. And it's a parable that Phil actually preached from several weeks ago when he was in his Be Rich Towards God series. And I think it was when he preached from Luke chapter 12, picking up in verse 13 in just a moment, as when my thoughts began to lead me to this point, to this lesson. Because Jesus tells a parable that I think helps summarize or helps give us a concrete thought into this particular lesson, or in this moment, this New Year's Eve that you and I find ourselves in. It speaks into Mark chapter 9, verse 35, but also speaks into the moment in the calendar that we're in. And so I want to pay attention to this particular parable. I want to pick up in verse 13, the setup of the parable. Luke chapter 12, picking up verse 13. Jesus, he's with his disciples. A crowd has formed around him, as they always do. And someone in that crowd says to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" And then he said to them all, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Now, before we get to the parable, understand what's taking place in this particular moment, which I almost find I find fascinating. That someone in the crowd is obviously having a family dispute with his brother over inheritance that they have received from a relative of some kind. And so he speaks up into the crowd, and he speaks up to the rabbi, Jesus, and he says, "Jesus, tell my brother, fix this for me. Tell my brother to give me my part of the inheritance." And what's fascinating to me is Jesus' response to the man, which is part of the parable. But his initial response is, he couldn't care less about this man's inheritance. He couldn't care less about the money that he thinks is owed to him from this family relative. Jesus doesn't care about the man's wealth. "Why do you call me your arbiter? What do you call me your judge?" In fact, he goes on to tell the entire crowd that your greed, Jesus obviously points out to this man's greed in this particular moment, your greed is not what is important. Your stuff, your inheritance, your money, your wealth, your position, what you think is fair and right is not what is important here in this moment. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Which is an important line because it sets up the parable. If life is not in the abundance of possessions, then what is? Jesus will answer that with his story, picking up in verse 16. So he tells him this parable. "The ground of a certain rich man, yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.' Then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain and laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry.'" Verse 20, "But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who's going to get what you have prepared for yourself?' This is how it'll be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Did you catch the response? Did you hear the response to the man in the story? You fool. What you think is important and what you think is great is not what is important or great in this life. What you think is the win is not the win at all. In fact, I find it incredibly fascinating in this particular parable that it's God who responds directly to the man. Did you notice that? It's God who speaks to the man in the story. And when Jesus tells parables, which parables are kingdom stories designed for us to think kingdom-like, and at best get us to discuss the kingdom of God, Jesus is pushing our current way of thinking when he tells parables. He wants us to get out of our ruts, get out of our boxes, and to think kingdom when he tells parables, when he tells these stories. And when Jesus tells parables, God is always a character in the story. He's the father. He's the shepherd. He's the man that owns the field, right? But here, God's God. And God comes out of the barrel of this man's grand scheme, this great plan to store up all of the grain, to have all these things. He has the win in sight. He knows what his next year is going to look like, and he's going to have it all prepared for him. God comes into the picture, and God says, "You fool, what are you doing? How can you stand at the beginning of a new year? How can you stand in a moment like this? How can you stand with all this surplus grain, all this great blessing that I have given to you? How can you stand here and say that this is the win? You fool." God comes in. And God pushes him out of his current thinking, out of his resolution, out of his goals, out of what he believes is the best that could happen. He doesn't recognize the win that the man has set up. And I am too afraid that God may not recognize my goals or my hopes or my dreams or my desires for 2018. Because they're too much about storing up and building up and having more and possession and position and place and stature and wealth than it is about being rich towards God. My fifth grader, my oldest, Reese, for Christmas, got a fire tablet for Christmas. And she wanted it primarily, I think, to message with some of her cousins. And so on Christmas Day, that's exactly what she did most of the day. She was messaging with one cousin in particular. And she comes up to me later on Christmas Day, and she's got her new device, and she's been texting with her cousin. And she comes up to me and she says, "Dad, I'm texting Layla, and every time I write the word happy, it changes it to shopping." Now, the conspiracy theorist in me says, they're doing that on purpose. Right? That this is the idea of what makes us happy. You are not happy, right? Unless you have more or get more, go out and do something more, or to gain more. The world tells us you can't be happy, you can't be rich, you can't have this, you can't win unless you have so much grain that you need to build bigger barns to store it all up so that someday down the road you can sit back, eat, drink, and be merry. The world has defined what happiness is for you and me. You know this, right? And it's shopping, and it's buying, and it's having, and it's getting, and it's doing. Man, I love the holidays, but I cannot stand being on some social media sites during the holidays because I have to go through pictures of people skiing or at Disney World or doing things that I'm not doing. And you know what it does for me? It makes me jealous. It makes me want. It makes me desire. Why? Because the world has programmed me to think that happiness or winning is to do the things that other people are doing, the things that I'm not doing, or to have the things that I can't have, to have the things that I don't have currently. We are programmed to be people that happy, that means we're going shopping. That means we're doing something else. It has changed us, and it has defined what the win is for each and every one of us. And God steps in, not the shepherd, not the field owner, not the Father. The God of all creation steps in, and He looks at each and every one of us, and He says, happiness is not shopping. Winning is not having more. Winning is not about you having something else, being more constructive with your life and your actions and your words and with what you do with the blessings that God has given you. That is the win. He doesn't recognize what you and I define as the win. He doesn't recognize what you and I define as happiness. He looks at us. He looks at me. And He says, "You fool. You fool." I want the next year to be different. Not because of anything I can do or set up or resolve to do. I want the next year to be different because God is first and foremost in everything that I do and say. I want this next year to be different, not because I have a word that's going to guide me through the year, but that I have a Savior who's going to lead me every step of every day. I want this next year to be different, not because I have defined what 2018 needs to look like, but because God has defined what the next day and the next day after that and the day after that is going to look like in my own life. I want to give two things that come from the parable in Luke chapter 12. Two things that I think you and I can do to win 2018. The first thing is, I want us to stop playing the wrong game. Stop playing the wrong game. Don't resolve or set up goals that are all about you and your barns and storing up all of your grain, like the man in the parable in Luke chapter 12. Stop playing the wrong game. So it's been a while, but I was playing a game of Jenga. Have you played this game before? You said, yeah, I heard a young one say yes. Of course you have, right? You set up all the different blocks in a tower, and with the people you're playing, one at a time, you pull out one block. Now the game goes, as you pull out the block and the tower falls, you lose because you caused the tower to fall. And so I'm playing with some of my kids not too long ago, a game of Jenga. Set up the tower, and we start going one at a time. And I'm playing by what I thought we were all playing with the same rules. I thought we were playing, you pull the thing out, and it falls on your turn, you're out, you lose. And really, when you lose at Jenga, it's just, I think the punishment is you have to clean up the mess, right? And set it back up. Well, my kids, I realized after a couple of turns, were playing a vastly different game. They weren't playing to not pull the tower down. They were playing to tear the tower down. And so if you pulled it out and the tower fell, you won. And you joyfully got to pick up all the blocks and set it back up. This was a different game. I wasn't playing by the same rules. And I think this is what's happened to us in so many ways in our world and our society and culture today, is we're playing the wrong game. And as followers of Jesus Christ, we're not playing the game that the world or society has set up for us. We are not playing to the finish line that the world says you have to go to. We are not playing their game. We are followers and disciples of Jesus Christ. We are believers of the God who's created us and everyone around us. We are believers. And we play by a different set of rules. We play a different game. Our win is not their declaration. It is God's and God's alone. Stop playing the wrong game. Secondly, stop playing the game. And I also want us to give up in order to win. Now, this may be hard for us logical thinkers. Give up to win. Giving up usually does not lead to winning, right? But I think, now parables have multi-layers of points, of takeaways. But I think one of the primary takeaways of Luke chapter 12's parable from Jesus is giving up is winning. Not storing up all of our excess grain into bigger barns, but rather, as Jesus puts it, being rich towards God, giving it away, blessing others, doing other things, not storing up more and more, but giving more and more. And that's a turning a thing upside down. That is the first will be last and servant of all. That is Jesus at his best, because he has taken what you and I think makes sense and just tossing the table over. Giving up. That's how we win. That's how God's people, disciples, followers of Jesus Christ, that's how we win. As we give up this world. We give up what we think is ours. We give up what we think will make us merry and happy and we'll drink more and all these different things. Whatever that is, we give it up. Several weeks ago was the Dallas Marathon. Some of you in this room ran in the Dallas Marathon. And many of you probably heard this story. It got national attention for a couple of days after the Dallas Marathon. But several weeks ago, the female winner of the full marathon in Dallas got to mile 24. Chandler Self, she is from New York. She came down to run the marathon. At mile 24, she kind of hit the wall. And she began to fall every few steps because her legs just grew so weak. Here's the last few yards of this. It's on video. It's about a minute long. Let's just watch this for a second.
This is just class right here by both of them. Another fall. We just all want her to just get there. She's given everything she possibly has to get to this finish line.
She is literally, from where we sit, we can see she's less than 50 yards from the finish. Sold a phenomenal athlete and triathlete, great runner.
She's just willing herself there.
And this is our winner, ladies and gentlemen. This is not normally what you expect to see at the finish of a marathon.
But Chandler Self has run herself to complete exhaustion, and she is so brave. This is incredible. And she's running fast. Remember, she's 30 minutes ahead, or slower than what the time is because she started earlier. She is still going to run the marathon in under 2 hours and 54 minutes. Tremendous, tremendous effort for Chandler Self today.
Oh, my goodness. So that's a fantastic time. She's going to be fine. We've seen this before. She's going to be absolutely fine. So don't worry about that. We got to get her refueled and get some glucose and some carbohydrate in.
Chandler Self hits this wall, pure exhaustion, and does everything she can to get to that finish line. And it's a fascinating story. It's an uplifting story, and it's an encouraging one because it's one about not giving up, right? It's one about doing everything that you can to get to that finish line. And many of us, this is why this is going to be the hardest point for us. Many of us look at that and we say, yes, that's what I've got to do. That's how I'm going to get that promotion. That's how I'm going to get that money. That's how I'm going to do this. We look at that and we say, we're not giving up. Even if my legs give out under me, I'm going to keep going. And it is a great story for goals and resolutions. Did you notice Chandler Self had help there, right? At mile 24, here's what happens. Her legs begin to grow very weak, and she begins to stumble. The young lady that was helping Chandler Self is Ariana Lutterman. She is a high school senior in the Dallas area, and she was the 13th person on the 13-person relay for the last couple miles. And so she's standing there, she's preparing to go for her leg of the relay when she sees Chandler Self coming around mile 24, struggling, falling. And Ariana gives up her leg of the relay and goes over and helps Chandler Self the last 2+ miles of the marathon. She stays with her the whole time, and every time she falls, she picked her back up. And she kept encouraging, you can do this. This is for you. You got this. Every time she fell, she was there. And you notice at the very end, did you see Ariana take her arm, literally take her arm and stretch it out for her, help her get across that finish line? See, we look at a video like that, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Chandler Self because it is an encouraging and uplifting story, but we look at that and we say, yes, that's how you do it. That's how you win. You don't give up. You keep going. And yes, that's true if you're running a marathon, but what about the marathon of life? What about living in the kingdom of God? I want to be more like Ariana. I think that's what it means to win. You give up everything that you have trained for and worked for and hoped for. You give up the big barns for all your surplus grain. You give up the notion of what your win is, and you go and you help someone else. And you do something different. You give up to win. Chandler Self may have won the marathon by time, but I think it was Ariana Lutterman who won that. She gave up to win. This is what I tell every spring we do a premarital class, and I'll do premarital counseling for different couples, and there's so much preparation that goes into the wedding day, so much. And I remind these couples, and I remind them that it's not about the day. It's about every day that comes after. We get to a point like this and we set up and we prepare and we think we've got this next year down. We got all these dreams, all these hopes, all these resolutions, all these goals. And we get to a day like this and we're saying, I'm going to love it, I'm going to love it, I'm going to love it. And then we get to, I don't know, end of January, maybe next week. I don't like it, I don't like it, I don't like it. 8% of those who make resolutions or goals for a year, 8% will keep them by the end of the year. And I think that's probably a pretty generous 8% figure. Most people are going to give up. Most people are going to keep falling, and they're just going to say, I can't do it. That's where the church steps in. That's where you and I as a body of believers step in. When we see those who are falling and stumbling and can't make it, we are those who give up so that we can win, so that they can win. We give up the barns and the grains and the surplus and the win. We give up the more so that we can be more like Christ, so that we can be the servant of all. We can be the last who is the first. We can turn the world upside down by how we act and how we live and what we say. That is how you win. That's how we do it. I want us to go into this year. I want you to go into this year with not just a resolution to get things done, but I want us to go into the year with a resolution to stop playing the wrong game. To go into this year to give up a little more so that we can win. There are many who have given up many things. There are many who have given up Memorial Road, for instance, to be a part of our Serve Midtown Church of Christ. There are many who have given up Memorial Road to be a part of the Heritage Church of Christ, which will start meeting in 2 Sundays. There are many who are going to be looking at what they can hold on to and give up as we launch into our Imagine campaign next year. Can you imagine not only what Memorial Road would be like with no debt, but can you imagine what your life would look like with no barns to store up your surplus, but that you give everything up and you help others? Can you imagine? Can you give up whatever it is you think the win is to be the servant of all? I want to offer an invitation, the Lord's invitation this morning. I'm going to make myself available down front. If there's a need of any kind, maybe today is the day. On this New Year's Eve, you need to say yes to Him in the waters of baptism, and you need to say no to the ways of the world. The wind of the world is not right. God doesn't recognize it. Maybe today is the day that you need to die to the ways of this world and be raised new in the waters of baptism so the Spirit of God can lead you every single day. Maybe today is the day that you need to be baptized. Maybe today is the day that you need this church to pray for you. Whatever your need may be, I'm going to make myself available down front. I want to invite you to come down front. But I know most of you are not going to move or at least come down forward. But I want to invite you, every single one of us, to stay right where we are. To take this next song, these next couple of minutes, and with God alone, resolve to stop playing the wrong game, to resolve to give up what we think the win is. Whatever your need is, I invite you to respond. Let's stand together as we sing.